Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL NewsRadio, your legacy home of the Cougars. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. It's a Monday edition of the show. Pretty good vibes for BYU sports right now, especially on the gridiron where BYU football put together an impressive bounce-back win over the TCU Horned Frogs.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
44-13, BYU crushes TCU, gives the Horned Frogs a little dose of the medicine that TCU's given to BYU the past 17 years or so. Dominant victory for the Cougars, who now improved to 9-1 overall, 6-1 in the Big 12 with 2 games remaining in league play. Everything in front of BYU still. Win the last 2, you're in Arlington going to the Big 12 championship game. And it was an impressive showing throughout the evening for BYU. Look, as Tanner Wall said, these late night spots for BYU, it's just their bread and butter, man. They are great in these 8:15 p.m. spots. And they showed it against TCU on Saturday night. Complete performance, especially from Bear Bachmeier. I thought Bear was exceptional in that game against TCU. Highest graded quarterback by Pro Football Focus over the weekend in the Power 4 ranks. Bachmeier finished with 23 of 33 passing, 296 passing yards, 1 touchdown through the air, and then on the ground, 10 carries, 59 yards, and a touchdown run. When Bear is able to have success like he did on Saturday, man, that was as good as it gets. That was a flawless performance. 70% completion rate, able to do a lot on the ground. The balanced attack from BYU's offense, they were making it a focus to get back to their identity. They showed that a lot on Saturday. Again, you just go through the numbers and the stats. There's just not much to nitpick from this game. And I think the big thing that we learned too is that BYU is an excellent football team. And I think, TCU is not a great team this year. They have completely fallen short of what I thought were pretty high expectations for this TCU team. They just seem like they lack any sort of identity or momentum right now in their program. It just seems dull for Sonny Dykes' team. But still, that doesn't take away from the fact that BYU hammered a bowl-eligible team who just a few weeks ago was 6-2. And they're reeling right now. They lost to an okay Iowa State team, and then they lost on the road to an excellent BYU football team. And it just feels like because it was a late-night spot, they're not getting the credit BYU is that they probably should. And Kalani Sitake was asked about the college football playoff rankings, if he has any opinion on that.
Yeah, I don't get involved in that. I'm just going to keep playing ball. So, yeah, I'm probably the wrong guy to ask about that stuff. We just play ball. Huh?
Would have been nice to get a little bit longer answer on that until Kalani gets cut off. That was great. But you expect that answer from Kalani Sitake. We'll find out the college football playoff rankings on Tuesday night, 6:30 p.m., the reveal for the CFP rankings. I'm really intrigued to see where BYU lands. I'd like to think they deserve to be at least 10, but I fear it's just going to be one spot bumped up from 12 to 11 because people can't wrap their mind around the idea that, maybe BYU is better than Alabama. Maybe BYU's better than Oregon. I think the brand bias is where it kicks in, and that becomes the difference for these teams because there's some aspects to BYU's resume that look really good. Strength of record, strength of schedules in the top 30. There's a lot of quality there. BYU's beaten a lot of teams that are bowl eligible currently. So you go through all these different items on BYU's resume, and then you add a piece where they're hammering a team, which was maybe you could argue an aspect to BYU's resume that was maybe lacking a little bit, the dominance of games from the Cougars, at least in Big 12 play. Well, they added that to their resume over the weekend over a bowl-eligible team. It just feels like these media analysts nationally are just chalking it up they're taking the safe road, and they're not taking a stand and actually saying, hey, BYU, really good team. They don't have to take a stand if they don't believe it. They don't have to if you don't believe it. But still, what's the reasoning why Alabama with 2 losses is automatically better than BYU? One of those losses was to a 5-loss team in Florida State who's not bowl eligible, and then you lose on your home field to a team in Oklahoma who's really good. Oklahoma's an excellent team. Second year in a row you lose to the Sooners, and you do it on your home field. BYU hasn't lost a home game. So, and then Oregon, what's the meat of the resume for Oregon? Penn State win in Happy Valley? I know the energy, the atmosphere was rocking for that game when James Franklin was there. But is that the big piece to Oregon's resume? Look, they hammered Minnesota over the weekend on Friday night, but again, I just think that when you also look at BYU's resume now, the Arizona win is looking really good. The East Carolina is trending up shockingly. There's some aspects, again, to the resume for BYU that are coming along quite well, yet no one seems to acknowledge that. BYU, though, not worrying about it, as Kalani Sitake said, and they showed against TCU a completely different mindset, and Kalani Sitake saw that from his team.
I felt like there was a different sense of urgency from them all week long in the prep. And so I'm glad that it all worked out. And, TCU is a really good team. I think it was just a matter of us putting it all together in all 3 phases. I think it worked out nicely, and it felt good. This game felt like I've been asking us to do this the whole time. So it's my job to get them to play this way every game, but I'm glad that it showed up now, especially in November, where we can try to build some momentum off.
Bear Bachmeier continued to impress, like I said. And then I also thought BYU's wide receivers played well. Chase Roberts, Parker Kingston. Kingston had 5 catches for 80 yards. Roberts, 5 catches for 50. No touchdowns between the two. Carson Ryan, career night for the former UCLA and Utah transfer. 4 catches, 79 yards. 1 touchdown, a touchdown grab of 43 yards that had a lot of yak involved there. I thought the defense was very stout, only giving up 115 rushing yards and more notably 183 passing yards to a TCU team coming into the game was averaging 300 yards per game through the air. To limit Josh Hoover to 43% completion rate, 2 interceptions, impressive showing from BYU secondary that's playing some really good football. I know that Texas Tech game was a spot where BYU had a total letdown. They did not play well, but I think a lot of that credit has to go to the fact that Texas Tech is one of the best teams in the nation. I truly believe that. I think Texas Tech is national title good, and if that's your only blemish, you should be a top 8 team. But BYU doesn't seem to get that benefit of the doubt. Top 30 strength of schedule, very competitive, but they got blown out against Texas Tech. And look, you got to answer for that. That's fair. They did not compete against Texas Tech. And that's where you can have some doubts and say, how good are they truly? But still, I think they responded and showed the nation this is a really good football team, but they got to continue to stack up those impressive performances. And I do believe style points don't necessarily say they're the end-all, be-all in college football, but if you can put together 30-plus point wins, you're going to be in a position to have everything in front of you, I'd like to think, in this college football playoff going forward. Let's take a break. On the other side, we'll get to the stock exchange, what's trending up in BYU football here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSLSports.com. Cougar Tracks rolls on here on the KSL Sports YouTube page on this Monday afternoon. BYU basketball had a strong showing in Boston against the UConn Huskies. They fall to the Huskies 86-84 in a top 10 clash. First time BYU was in a top 10 game in 14 years. This looked like a game at many stretches of this game in the first half and early second half where this was going to get ugly. UConn was up by 20 points, and it didn't look like it was going to be a day where BYU was going to receive much praise at all coming out of this game, and it felt like there was going to be talks of how good is BYU truly? Are they a fraud? Well, they responded, and they responded without two of their starters in Kennard Davis and Keba Keita. Keba Keita goes out around the 9-minute mark in the first half with a tough collision, got hit in the head. That was scary how he was walking off a little bit wobbly. Kevin Young gave no official update after the game on Keba Keita. He did note in his opening remarks in Boston, he didn't answer any questions in regard to Kennard Davis, but he said that Kennard was out due to a violation of team rules. Obviously, Davis was arrested for alleged DUI in Provo on Thursday morning. He was with the team in Boston over the weekend. But I thought the response from BYU in that game against one of the best teams in the country in UConn, I thought that's something you can build off of. And AJ DeBonsa in his homecoming in Boston, where his dad, Ace, is dressed to the nines, excellent royal blue suit by Ace. AJ, I thought, was very impressive in that second half. 25 points, 8 of 14 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3. And that's noteworthy because people tend to knock his ability to shoot the 3 ball. AJ was excellent, and the elite shot-making ability, as Danny Hurley noted in the post-game press conference, was on full display. That move in the paint that AJ had, a little bit of bump on Caravan, and then he gets to the rim, the length, the athleticism to make a move like that happen and make it look somewhat easy. Incredible ability there from AJ. So I love the fight that BYU showed to get back in this game. I thought still there's a little bit of a feeling out for this BYU team compared to UConn, who had 4 of its 5 starters returning from last year. A little bit more continuity, and then Silas DeMary, he was an excellent fit at point guard for UConn, 21 points for him, along with Terrace Reed, who we talked about on the show. He had 21, and then Caravan had 21 as well. UConn is going to be potentially Final Four good. It wouldn't shock me if we saw a rematch down the road, maybe an Elite 8, somewhere along the line. I think these teams could potentially meet up again in March, and sign me up for that. I think BYU could battle again with UConn. The fact that they were able to compete in a hostile environment where it was basically a road game. There was a good number of BYU fans, including some former BYU players sitting courtside. Eric Mika, TJ Haas, Kyle Davis, Nick Emery, McKay Cannon. It was like the old Dave Rose team back sitting courtside in Boston. But I think that, getting BYU at full strength, be curious to see what a rematch would look like if that does happen. But we've learned from year one under Kevin Young, look, it takes time. But don't think for a second that BYU is not going to continue to improve. I believe they will. I thought there was reason for optimism, and I hate to kind of take the moral victory approach, but I think there was a lot to like from that game if you're BYU, to show the fight, to be down and out, down personnel. You could have easily thrown in the towel and lost by 25, 30 points. Could have been an easy blowout and say, you know what, I get it, long travel. BYU showed some fight, though, and I think that's something you can build off of. Still, I think there's some areas where you got to improve. Only 7 assists on 29 made field goals. You got individual talents who can get to the rim and get a bucket. You love that, but that passing has got to improve, where you're getting those assists off made field goals, because last year's team was brilliant at that with the spacing. So that's an area where I think BYU's got to level up. I think also, too, the late game situation, I just felt like that was the spot where you needed AJ to have the ball, or even Richie Saunders. Richie's ability to get to the hoop and go downhill and attack the rim in that second half. You were seeing vintage Richie in stretches in that second half against UConn. Now, the three ball, that wasn't falling. Tough day shooting for Richie. 0 of 7 from the field, or three-point line, excuse me. But BYU as a whole, not great shooting the three. 8 of 26 from three. Guys like Mihailo Boskovic, 0 for 5 from three. Mihailo's got to get it going. That becomes a liability. When you're a bench guy and you're going 0 for 5, I know the rotation was thin there with guys out, including Keba Keita, and Mihailo's a stretch 5, but you got to be that stretch 5 and knock down some shots to live up to that. He's 0 for 8 this season from three, and some of those misses were pretty wild. I mean, did not touch iron. So Mihailo's got to work his way through that, but that's something that's a little bit, I think, concerning, the early slow start for Mihailo. I did like some of the minutes from the new faces, the guys that are freshmen. Xavier Staten, he played a few minutes, but I liked some of the ability to alter shots, some of the shot blocking ability from Xavier Staten. Just quality minutes in a high-level matchup. That's something to build off of. And again, that kind of feels a little moral victory-like. But the great thing about college basketball, I know I just went on a rant about college football. The great thing about college hoops, one loss does not sink you. A 2-point loss to a great UConn team, in fact, helped BYU. They moved up in the analytics in KenPom. They moved up in those advanced data. Now, the AP pollsters, I'm sure they dinged them. You know, BYU probably got dinged by the AP voters, as Nate Slack, my producer on Cougar Sports Saturday, he tracks every single day, and they fell 2 spots down to 9, which to me, I'm okay with, because if we're going to do the whole thing in football where, hey, how is Notre Dame in front of BYU? How is... You got to fall. You can't just say that. You can't be okay with quality losses in one sport and not the other. Now, unfortunately, in football, they get the quality loss benefit for teams like Notre Dame. BYU does not, doesn't seem like. But BYU falls to number 9 in the AP Top 25. And I'm glad that they stayed in the top 10 because they deserve that. Because I thought BYU has shown that they're one of the best teams in college basketball. And how crazy is it, too? Football, you've got a 1-loss BYU team who's just buried behind a bunch of 2-loss teams. Basketball, however, they're the highest-ranked 1-loss team in the country. They're in front of Florida, the defending national champs, who beat Miami last night. Florida's 3-1. Number 11, Alabama at 2-1. And then Mark Pope's Kentucky Wildcats, they're 3-1 at number 12. Gonzaga, undefeated 4-0 at number 13 in the rankings. The number 1 team this week is Purdue. The pollsters dropped Houston for a close call to Auburn, which, is that grounds to move someone down? Okay, I guess a win in Birmingham, Alabama, backyard of Auburn, is grounds to say, let's drop them in the polls. I don't know. Basketball AP poll, it is what it is. It doesn't ultimately matter. Football, it seems to carry a lot more weight. But BYU getting some respect, even though they dropped a little bit in this week's AP Top 25 poll. But BYU will bounce back. I think BYU will be fine. I thought this was a building opportunity. Again, I think the big question again with Kennard Davis, what's his status going forward? That's got to be something that gets resolved. Kevin Young didn't say indefinitely, but he just said that violation of team rules, he's out. They didn't really give a timeline in Boston as to how long he would be out with that suspension, but he was with the team over the weekend. But a lot of good things, I think, to take away from that game for BYU, despite what really was a terrible start to the game against UConn. But the Cougs fall 86-84. They're now 3-1 overall this season. Their next game will be this Friday against the Wisconsin Badgers, who appear at number 23 in the AP Top 25. So another Top 25 clash this week for BYU Hoops, and that will take place 2 p.m. on Friday, pregame at 1 o'clock on KSL NewsRadio, and that will be televised streaming on Peacock, NBC's streaming platform. We'll take our final time out. On the other side will be the BYU football stock exchange right here on Cougar Tracks. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on KSL NewsRadio and the KSL Sports YouTube page. We continue to roll on here on the program. Mitch Harper with you. And on Mondays every week during the season, we roll out what's trending and trending up and down in the world of BYU football. We call it the Stock Exchange.
The Cougar Stock Exchange. Stock Exchange. What's trending up and what's trending down? It's the Cougar Stock Exchange.
There's a lot to point to in the trending up category this week. Last week, I was struggling to find anything that was trending up after the loss to Texas Tech. This week, there's so much to point to. Easy to point to Bear Bachmeier. I think that was underrated, just how impressive he was responding from adversity, because sometimes QBs, it's kind of like pitchers in baseball, where if you get that moment of defeat and adversity, it can sometimes break you. And that early success, that momentum, maybe can never be recaptured. Bear was excellent, and I thought that his showing really silenced any possibility to suggest that he's not going to be someone that responds to adversity at a high level. So I think definitely Bear Bachmeier is trending up, and that's a good sign for BYU as they continue to chase the Big 12 championship game. Also, LJ Martin, 21 carries, 88 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. He also had receptions, 4 catches for 34 yards. This was LJ after the game on how he felt health-wise compared to the week prior at Texas Tech.
I think it was health. I think it was just more confidence. I feel like last week, just coming off the injury, I just felt like a little bit nervous, a little bit more nervous. And, they were also a good team, so that didn't help at all. So, tonight I just had more confidence, and I was just able to get going earlier, and I felt really good.
Injuries are a tricky deal. They can play with the mental psyche, and pretty candid answer, I think, from LJ Martin to admit that he was nervous. Little concerned going up against a talented Texas Tech defensive front, and maybe there just was some questions in that shoulder of how strong and healthy he would perform in Lubbock. Well, he silenced that and looked really good against TCU. And that 25 touch mark, I think, is important, because that's got to be the floor for LJ Martin every game going forward if BYU wants to continue piling up wins. How about this one, too? Tausili Akana, defensive end. He was the highest graded defensive player for BYU in their win over TCU. Akana played about 15 snaps in the game, but he was generating pressure, quarterback hurries. He got a sack, tackles for loss. Akana is going to be a great player for BYU. It's taken a little bit longer than I expected. I thought coming out of fall camp that he would be an instant playmaker on this defense. But, hey, heading down the home stretch, he's turning into that now, and it's promising, because when you get big picture, beyond what happens in 2025, you've got your star edge rusher for 2026 and beyond. He's only a redshirt sophomore. He's still got 2 years of eligibility remaining. Now, you got to retain him in portal, and I get all that. It's always dicey to say, hey, this guy's back, because they can always leave coming up in January when the portal opens. But I'd like to think with him having some early success and that confidence, because his first 2 years at Texas, he didn't play a lick. And I'm sure that impacted his confidence. When we talk about the injuries affecting the confidence of LJ Martin, I'm sure not playing after being such a heralded recruit coming out of Sky Ridge High School, that probably played on the mental psyche of Tausili Akana. This is a complex defense to learn. It's finally clicking. He's playing some great football. He is going to be a special player for BYU, and I thought his impact was on full display against TCU. And to a lesser extent, too, Nusi Talmoy-Peau. He had a sack on the final defensive play of the game. BYU's pass rush in general is playing at a high level and trending up. They got 4 sacks in that game against TCU. That is very promising for BYU to have that level of success. I thought some other guys defensively that really caught my attention. Sialia Serra only played about 30 snaps in the game. Some people were wondering, what's the issue with Sialia? Is he playing? Is he in? Is he out? Well, he played. It was just rotating in with Max Alford. Max Alford got a little bit shaken up in that game against TCU, but I thought Siale was really stout and one of the better linebackers in the game for BYU. Also, Keanu Tanavasa trending up. Keanu had his best game as a BYU Cougar. He recorded a sack, one of those 4 sacks that I noted, but Tanavasa looked like the dominant interior player that I think everyone expected him to be. And I think his impact just goes unnoticed a lot by fans. He draws so many double teams. The amount of attention that Keanu Tanavasa draws every week from opposing offensive lines, if you're not watching that area of the game, it can be easy to look at the final stat sheets and go, well, he's not that impactful. No, he is. Keanu is a heck of a football player. I still believe it'd be great to see him come back in 2026 and get one more year. But hey, performances like the one he had against TCU, that's good film for NFL scouts. Be curious to see how things continue to progress for Keanu moving forward this season. But the defense, I thought, was excellent. And they looked every bit the part of a top 3 defense in the Big 12 this year. They're not going to be the number 1 defense. That's Texas Tech. But number 2, number 3, BYU is one of the better defenses in this conference. There's no doubt about that. And then trending down, not much to say on the trending down front for BYU in this game. But if I had to pick one, it's the punter situation. Kalani Sitake throws a little bit of a curveball. Sam Vanderhaar gets demoted from the starting punter spot. They go to Fuller Shirts. The backup, transfer from Boise State, gets his first appearance. He had 2 punt opportunities. The first one, he boots it. Not a bad kick. Second one, he's going for the punt, fumbles the thing. Turnover. That's not good. And Sam Vanderhaar, Kalani reveals, was dealing with an injury at Texas Tech, which they believe caused the shanks in Lubbock. So that punter situation, not ideal right now. So that's trending down. But great thing about that spot, just do what you did against TCU. First 7 drives, scoring. Don't worry about the punter. Best thing to erase the punting woes maybe right now, don't let those guys touch the field and just put up points. That's going to do it for this edition of Cougar Tracks. I hope all of you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast. Also, go to the KSL Sports YouTube page, and you can watch these episodes on your smart TV, your phone, your apps, whatever it may be, on YouTube. Just search KSL Sports YouTube or Cougar Tracks wherever you get your podcasts. It's always available, and leave a 5-star rating and a review. I'll be back tomorrow with an insider look at the Cincinnati Bearcats and more as the Cougs get ready to take on Cincy in a big noon kickoff showdown coming up this week in the Queen City for Cincinnati? Should be a lot of fun. Cougs and Bearcats this week, 6 p.m. kick here on KSL. We'll kick off the coverage starting tomorrow right here on Cougar Tracks.